Hi, well, thank you for having me here. I thought, yeah, if I just say a couple of things about it, play the film, and then I can talk a little bit about it. I'll probably switch off my camera just to make sure that the signal's all okay for it. Yeah, I'm in a cafe. I can see the sea. It's a bit drizzly and misty, so I've come indoors. But anyway, they kindly give me Wi-Fi. So basically, what I said I would do this year is that I would walk riverside and woodland and drawing what I see as I go. So using my pen on paper to just track anything I see, from sounds, movement, also the rhythm of actually walking, so that's part of it as well. So it could be bird song. I might pause for a little while, or I might carry on. Could be the movement of a branch, flight of a butterfly, anything else really. But I'm also trying to kind of geolocate it a bit on the page. So it might be over to the right, to the left, down there, up there. So yeah, do you want to just play the film? If there is some sound on it, and I might just read the text over the top.
Can you see the film now?
Yes, I can. Yeah. Great. Okay, I'll turn my camera off just so it doesn't interfere. There should be some sound with it, Sonia.
Is it not playing the sound?
It's a kind of sound of a water and then bird song.
There was definitely some noise then.
Oh, okay. That's all right if you can hear it.
I can't hear bird song though, I'm afraid. Very quiet. Oh.
As I walk, I draw between riverside and woodland. Begin at weir, rushing water, bubbles, nettles wave in gentle breeze, brambles dance, leaves and branches sway, twigs float by, petals scatter on ground, dandelion clocks disperse, birds fly by, perch overhead, sound of traffic, of trains, of meadow being mown, the occasional passer-by, chiff-chaff robin, long-tailed tit, magpie, blue-tit robin, splashes of yellow, white, purple, mostly green, end where river ripples.
Thank you, Ruth. Yes, we did hear a little bit of bird song.
Okay, yes, it is quite, yes. The sound was an issue on the video anyway. I don't know if you want to leave the still image a bit up at all, so there's something to look at. But
I'm going to put you up so that we can hear
you. Okay.
If your camera is stable enough.
I think it is, yeah. I mean, basically, I was looking for that kind of visually mapping what I see, and I was thinking about the themes for this year's Congress as well, thinking about biodiversity, about layers of history, heritage as well, and it really is just what I see and hear whilst I'm moving. I suspect every one of you here finds that when you go out, things change. You have a plan, anything that it takes into account going outside and walking. So it could be the weather, which is an obvious one. It could just be an unexpected sound. It could be a bird that flies by, or something stops me. It shifts my attention. So I always find that when I'm out and about, my attention shifts quite a lot from what I planned in a different way to if I'm in a studio. So it's really just led by completely what I'm seeing and when I'm walking. So last couple of years, I made some works for the Congress, and one was aligned towards the sun, one was aligned towards the moon, and they were both very much more weather driven, particularly last year, where I spent pretty much the whole summer looking for this moon that was hiding behind the clouds and wouldn't show itself. So this year I thought, well, I'll be fine with the weather, but then it rained most of July. So eventually, anyway, it was fine. And I went for my walk. And I was thinking again around the theme. So the place I selected it's between parkland and river. So you've basically got the river here, park, it's a town park there, and then there's a canal over to the other side. And it starts off being quite domesticated and it gradually gets a bit more overgrown as you go further out. So thinking about kind of time going right back, it's limestone beneath my feet. It's a mix of kind of older trees in the park, and then there's also newer areas that have been opened up and new trees planted. So there's a mix across history and time. The river here isn't far from the source, so it's quite shallow around there. It's relatively, it goes down, it basically goes in and out of being shallow and then very shallow and then gets deeper. So it joins the River Thames further downstream, which of course is absolutely loaded with heritage, as is parts of the canal and or the wider network of the canal system. It used to be the first part of the park, it used to be a Victorian rubbish dump. So it's now the recreational park, but there is those layers of history underneath it. It's also the flood zone for the town, so completely changes whenever there's flooding. And brings in a lot of wildlife as well as the water fills. There's also a lake further out, which has been added in recent years as part of the flood scheme that we've got. You can hear traffic quite a lot. There's a train also goes nearby, which can, in various parts, it's quite dominating. But I still find that you can just tune in as you're walking to that sound of the river, of wildlife, of the trees, the wind in the trees. So you can still kind of tune into those nearer sounds. I was also thinking about, also with the theme of the Congress, about the sense of longing for something. And it's quite a landlocked area in the centre of England. And so I'm kind of just thinking, longing for the sea, basically, which is, here I am now and I can see the sea, which is wonderful. So that's the first thing. I'm thinking about water, and also particularly in England, I'm longing for clean rivers that I can swim in, where the wildlife and the ecology can thrive. In terms of materials, I could show you it here, so you can see the kind of scale. Can you see it there okay? I selected a folded length of paper, a little bit tatty around the edges, and it was just big enough so it fits into my hand. I could put it in my backpack, I could take it for a walk. I was kept up a fairly steady pace, just drawing things, different sounds. Went on to the back as well. So unlike my other years for the Congress, I need to go over that way a bit, I think, it was where I was very much around the sky and looking up at the sky. These ones were more about looking down, underfoot, about looking to my right, to my left, kind of that 360 degrees view, really. And looking either side, although I did find the shadows also, had an effect from the sky, the wind, obviously. So it's all those kind of elemental impacts from multi-directional. So as mapping it really, I suppose, is a word that I'd use with a lot of my drawings like this, and being caught up in what I see, and also noting some words and observations. So in no sense poetry, much more just little phrases, just trying to make a note of whatever caught my eye. And I put those words into the drawing at the end. I photographed it in situ. I kind of thought, do I take it home, photograph it in more controlled lighting, or shall I just do it in the place where it was? And I thought, in line with the project, I wanted it all to be very much just this walk. So it was all made into the video then. I didn't have good sound recording at all. It's just done with my phone. So when I got home, the bird song had a lot of kind of background noise of the wind and of the traffic. So I used the sound of the weir at the start of the walk, where I could get close enough that sound was dominant. And then in terms of using a sound recording for the bird song, I chose one that I'd made on summer solstice for another art project, which I'm making work for at the moment. And that was made from my tent, which actually a tent acts as quite a nice kind of mic buffer sound. So I used that. And at first I was a bit unsure, thinking I need to go and get a better sound recording. But then actually I quite like the fact that as you get the list of birds from Chiff Chaff Robin, that you've got a sound recording from another place. And I kind of quite like that, especially as we're all, coming in from multiple places here, online, in person, and that way that it doesn't necessarily have to make sense. It could be that some of you can hear different bird song right now, or as the video is playing. So I decided to leave it at that and let us just run with our memories. And if it doesn't quite make sense and you're listening to different birds from the ones listed, I decided that was okay. In terms of its kind of a way of drawing, it's something I'm doing quite a bit at the moment. I have got a couple of others. I can't honestly remember. This might be a winter solstice one that I did, or it could be one I did from the train. So a different way where I'm static and things are moving in front of me. So that one's a pencil one. I've got kind of loads of them, but there's a couple here. There's can zoom in, so I think that might be a train one by the looks of it, possibly. And so I've also got quite a few in little concertina, very small booklets that I'm making for a Walk in the Land project at the moment, walking the Honeybourne line in Cheltenham. And as I'm walking it with others, I'm just jotting down in quite a similar way, words, notes, what catches my eye as moving, and that I'll use to bring together. I don't know what into yet, but something for an exhibition and symposium that's coming up next year. Other kinds of drawings are quite static that I make. There's another project I'm working on, pausing and doing very small, just little hand-sized drawings of the ground. And 72 of them will be shown in Cirencester at the Corinium Museum in a couple of weeks. That goes up. If anyone's interested in Flint, there's that exhibition. And at the moment, I'm over here in the Isle of Portland, so I'm going to be doing some more little ground drawings, but more pausing as I walk, as opposed to drawing whilst moving. So lots of different ways. And then, I must mention, before I go, as you're all in Canterbury on chalk, on Monday I'm off to the Big Chalk Conference in Winchester for 3 days. So if any of you have links to chalk, do let me know. So I think probably, I don't know if you want to move on to the next person or if there's any questions. There's links on my website, by the way, and it's on my Vimeo and YouTube video as well.
Thanks very much, Ruth. Yes, we do.
I just love the poem.
It's beautiful, isn't it? Yeah.
It's a beautiful poem and very peaceful.
Oh.
I just wonder if you consider yourself, you're an artist, but do you consider yourself to be a poet as well?
Absolutely. No, absolutely not. Thank you for calling it a poem.
Thank you. Okay, Ruth, we'll take questions all together at the end. Thanks. So do hang around, and thanks very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
That's it.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Yeah. So.
Is it me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I need to be. That's it. In the beginning, there was a shockwave carried throughout the land. Almost a year ago, on the 28th of September, an event set in motion our path towards Hiraeth via a triangulation through a series of tree encounters that engage with critical issues of tangible, intangible, non-spectacular heritage, acknowledging the full role of the beyond human element in all of this. Starting from there, extending backwards, forwards, this is a work in regress, progress. We intend to provoke more questions than answers.
Added to the non-human element, we here explore psychogeography beyond the built environment. The event Simon mentions was the brutal felling of the iconic tree at Sycamore Gap on Hadrian's Wall, which is not the one right now. We'll be talking about 3 trees. So the one at Sycamore Gap, this one, which is a memorial park in Maryport, near where we live, and one in Ruthin, Wales. The first two of our trees are fallen. The third one is standing, and it is the one we had a performance around. We also gathered stories on Hiraeth, being in Wales, and here is part of an interview with Evan Davis.
Hiraeth is a Welsh word about severe longing. Like if you go here young, we used to go to Glensinch as kids, and then you stay for a weekend, but you want to go home, and that's you get a severe longing for home. It could be here for the old days, longing for the old days. Here I stuck, it's by here, and it's a moor without wind, which is very sparsely populated and very higher up, and there's nothing there. It's very glum, really. It's called Hiraethog, which comes from the word Hiraeth, and it's a bit of a got a bit of atmosphere about the place there. And then
so there were the birds. So far away from Hiraethog, in space but not in spirit, we travelled to Hadrian's Wall to find a gap. Defined as a gap, we now perceive a gap within a gap, a negative space filled with memory, reflection and grief. The iconic sycamore tree confounded Hiraeth in its fall by straddling a border distant in time, edge of control, echoing a discontinuity in history. On which side do you stand? And to capture the best view, facing England or facing Scotland? And what of this gap in ancient woodlands, probably cleared in the Neolithic around 14,000 years later, the sycamore possibly planted deliberately, eventually becoming a symbol of the wild and remote natural world and a site of Hiraeth. The birds, the two birds on there, very tiny. Throughout the time we were there, the swooping dance of the crows seemed to be sculpting embodied memories. Bearing them before us, an intangible bird memory, questioning the reality of this gap, recalling a fellow being extracted before its time, their tree of knowing, now turned into a squat, square fence. It felt so strange to be there. A creeping sense of Hiraeth had begun to emerge. Throughout the time we were there, strange that such a perfect specimen had no progeny growing around it. How come? Our highly sophisticated psychogeographical techniques we used to look behind, and we looked to both sides of the negated spectacle. And sure enough, there it was, saved from the ruminating jaws of marauding sheep. The seed sown on stony ground had survived. And it's quite possible that this tree, in fact, displaced is a displaced replacement tree, but we haven't established that yet. How wild is this wilderness, this attachment, this Hiraeth? How remote our emotional calibration to the picturesque in the face of arboreal carnage?
So this replacement tree once stood in a stone-built enclosure, which we only found out about when watching the Robin Hood film that features sycamore gap tree, and that was an unexpected discovery. The enclosure hardly ever appears on photos. Was it short-lived, as if no one remembers? It would have been at the right-hand side of this photo. When visiting the site, we spoke to other tourists, and it turned out that no one of them we spoke to had seen the tree before it got shut down. Was it too painful for those who knew the tree? The Economist published the news of the tree loss as an obituary. The spiritual and sacred dimension between us and trees that was now noticed, and the BBC published a Good Friday meditation about the story of the tree so far. The space had shifted identity, now a tourist space, but formerly a double border space between the Roman Empire and the outside, the not Roman, and between England and Scotland, a debatable land. When the tree was young, this was edgeland, possibly contested by border reavers. Though estimations about the tree's age vary widely, the National Trust believes it's only 150 years old, but many sources believe it's double the age. If it is 300 plus years old, it could have been planted around the Act of Union in 1707 as a union tree. Slide. Yeah. So now the tallest tree in the land is actually a tree on the other side. This is the tree that would have been in Scotland, and it feels like a changing of the guard. So this one is a hawthorn tree, now tallest in the land. Next. Now the stump of the tree, and the stump it leaves on the land like a wound. It looked like a scene of a massacre, as if blood had come out of the tree. Battle of Wounded Tree, a particular case of damaged landscape. Harriet Sams talks about wounded landscapes as a result of our land being misused and undervalued. And now here, this wound, this damage, this wound is magnified. I did a sketch of the stump from each direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. And drawing all the cardinal directions was like drawing the damage. Beyond the drawing, at the side of the stump, however, the stump is actually sprouting again, and that side is the off side that I didn't draw at the time. Now, next slide. And here is another stump that we encountered a few months after, and that is the one tree, a fallen tree in Maryport. So it felt like an echo. This one fallen by a storm, however, and producing a leaning stump, but still feeling like an echo of what we'd experienced from stump to stump. No, that's, yeah, okay, yeah. So one of the biggest trees in the park had collapsed, and it was during a double storm and producing a triple and a leaning stump, this new stump on the landscape. I put the bit about the stump in my logbook, fully aware of the irony. When I wait for the bus at the side of the park, I often see lorries carrying logs in front of live trees. As I write, I encounter stump mirrors, a tree stump resembling our fingerprint, consolidating our tree self. We connect with trees through our fingertips. Slide. The ancient Celts planted a tree wherever a new community got established. So a fallen tree also means the loss of community. And that's right, yeah. Like with the sycamore, as with the sycamore gut tree, this was a border crossing involved a wall as well. The fall damaged a boundary and edge, a link between public and private space. Next to the fall mark of the tree is a memorial to fallen soldiers of the war. The war memorial was inaugurated in 1921, which is when the space became a park. The tree predates the park space, so the tree had become part of a different space without moving. The only way to break free of its park enclosure probably was the act of smashing the wall to gain freedom.
Focusing on the great wind that brought the tree down, we may link the increase in frequency and intensity of storms to the panoply of climate change, with the implication of human involvement. This may be so, but I noticed something strange and magical happening on a micro scale with our beech tree years before, back in 2021. And we have to play the bit. Yeah. Is it doing it? Oh. No. Anyway, imagine a vortex of leaves. This little pile here was actually created by the tree. So all of these leaves will do a circuit, they'll come back and land back in the pile. And this was quite a remarkable thing. I've seen it in other contexts, but In this context, it was tree related, and this tree was sweeping up all the leaves in the park. The collaboration of tree and wind gathering together fallen leaves on the lee side of the pile. This micro psychogeographical wonder has now vanished, leaving an indescribable feeling of longing for it to return. And as Ursula pointed out, the collapse of this tree breached a wall enclosing a private space that nobody or very few had visited for many years. Here was a pristine woodland with luxuriant undisturbed growth slightly later in the year, and an unbelievable volume of birdsong that we witnessed and recorded. Here, a 14th century peel tower built largely of Roman dressed stones remained a reminder of contested lands of the border reavers once more, surrounded by a handful of crumbling stones of empire disappearing in the undergrowth. It also turns out that behind the Memorial Park wall, there had been another wall, defining a small plantation of the 17th century Netherhall estate. Now, this has been completely taken over by the wild. Whether or not our tree had been planted deliberately 300 or so years ago remains unanswered. Next slide. But here, our tree remains in Google Street View. The dramatic collapse is completely overlooked, where the tree happily continues its living presence, the now being tugged back towards what has gone, for the time being at least. And finally, another sign pointing towards resurrection and regrowth as fragile signs of new life spring from the severed stump, as is happening at Sycamore Gap as well. An echo of cuts and austerity leading to a vigorous future. Pollarded trees do outlive their uncut counterparts, apparently. Okay, now we're now moving on to Ruthin. We did a performance at Ruthin International Festival earlier in the summer. Although the sycamore is acknowledged to be non-native to the UK, possibly introduced by the Romans, it's also possible that this magnificent ancient beech tree is in fact an American beech, its seed brought over in the 17th century. This prompted me to consult the venerable Woodland Trust to see what the situation is between native and non-native species. And I quote, "Native UK trees colonised the land when the glaciers melted after the last ice age, and before the UK was disconnected from mainland Europe, indicating that our arboreal natives are perhaps more fluid than some might think, or like." The ruins. The borders between England and Wales have been fought over for many centuries, with Wales becoming England's first colony in the late 13th century. The feeling for Wales belonging to the Welsh defines Hiraeth, but this is also fluid. When Cromwell destroyed Ruthin Castle during the Civil War, perhaps he planted this tree as a symbol, the tree you saw earlier that is, as a symbol of conquest. Over the years, the tree has begun to tower over the ruins. The ruins crept under the undergrowth, giving rise to further possibilities of spectacular heritage and emergent feelings of Hiraeth for ensuing generations. The exotic is never far away, however, and you may recall the bird calls towards the end of Iffin's testimony. No ordinary birds, the peacocks of Ruthin Castle, themselves legacy of empire, imported to the cold and damp climes of Wales from their native haunts of India and Sri Lanka. Perhaps their eerie calls are expressions of Hiraeth, telling us something of hidden relationships with distant lands. They were also strangely responsive to the sine wave oscillations I was generating as part of our intervention there.
So, and here you see our tree where we performed around back in still at Ruthin. And Ruthin, I think we mentioned, is located near the borderland with England. So we are on the edge here again. And it makes sense that our tree work would take us to Wales, connecting up with the Welsh kingdom of that Cumbria, where we live, is related to. So from Cumbria to Cumbria, and even up to Hadrian's Wall with the kingdom of Reged, which was a Welsh-related kingdom. This tree looks undamaged and uncut. So here was a reversal. It was the built environment which was partly in ruins, and the tree was not. In our performance, we responded to the theme of the festival Elsewhere, relating Hiraeth to an elsewhere space. We were marking each time zone in the world, bringing the elsewhere around the tree. So here at Ruthin, we are next to Hiraeth, which is the moorland that F.N. Davis was talking about. And what does Hiraeth embody for Hiraeth? Is it Hiraeth's Mecca? How many people go there to experience Hiraeth? I also wonder whether its location next to the borderland with England is significant, just behind the borderland, because this is the first place where home is secure, where Wales can declare home in peace, where one's longing for belonging is not under threat. Next slide. Hiraeth is an emotional heritage and attachment to place, literally a psychogeography. And so it occurs in Welsh literature as well and beyond. Note Dylan Thomas's book, To the Trees and the Stones. To conclude, Simon will introduce English poet Elizabeth Jennings, refer to something that could be Hiraeth as well.
So, Hiraeth is by definition elsewhere, something lost and longed for, perhaps lost forever, revealed through the many forms of fall and collapse. The traces we've encountered so far point us to this elsewhere, coalescing with myth and the embodied sinews of deep time, somewhere beyond our familiar surfaces and shifting screens. So here, the last two verses of Elizabeth Jennings, In a Garden. Even the beech tree from next door, which shares its shadow with me, seemed a kind of threat. Everything was too neat, and someone cares in the wrong way. I need not have stood long, mocked by the smell of a mown lawn, and yet I did. Sickness for Eden was so strong. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Lydia. I am Nightingale and Sage, both of them. I just want to say I've cried already twice today. Once when I was handing in my relic and I was asked a question about it, and the second time I was getting my cup of tea and the person in front of me put a folder down and it had a sticker on it with a name, and I said, "Is that you?" And she said, "Oh no, that's not me, someone lent me the folder." It was my mum's name. Oh. Right, so I'll try and keep my emotions in check. So hiya, I'm Lydia. Hi to everybody online and watching the recording. A quick introduction to me. I wear 3 hats. I've worked in a specialist cancer hospital for 20 years. That's the bit that pays the money. And in 2020, I started doing creative walking and urban walks in my local park. And that eventually led to some training, becoming a freelance walk leader. That pays a little bit of money. And more recently, I've rekindled my creative practice, and that doesn't bring any money in. The description of the word Hiraeth brought me here today. Deep longing for a person or thing which is absent or lost, yearning, nostalgia, homesickness. Both my parents died last year, and on the 28th of April, I wrote this in my proposal. From cradle to no grave, a walk around what time? And then I wrote, yesterday was a celebration of my mum's life. Today, for the first time, I visited both my maternal grandparents' graves and my mum's early childhood homes. Tomorrow is the first anniversary of my dad's final hospital admission. So Sonia's going to help and just play these on a loop, whether it's backwards and forwards, whatever works for you. So they're just in just going to take them for a walk, lovely. My plan was to research, design and walk a route around my hometown, linking significant places in my parents' lives, and to walk this route with my sister, T, my only sibling. I planned, plotted and remembered. I started my research in June, and when I heard that the proposal was successful, and this included accessing the censuses in my city library, visiting the local studies section in Wicktown's library, going to a small heritage centre, looking at OS maps from the 1950s, scoring through back copies of the local newspaper on microfiches, reading books about maths observation, and collecting all the scraps of paper that I scribbled on when my parents told me things about their past, looking at websites about children's homes, and also contacting the British Library to access summaries of recordings made as part of the oral history project celebrating the NHS at 70. I looked at technical reports, diplomas, leaving certificates, and in advanced foundry studies, in pattern making, midwifery and nursery nursing, and I read my dad's redundancy paperwork. I always knew that I would anonymise this project using aliases, alter egos, initials, vagary, erasure and self-censure in order to protect the living and the dead. How to design a route and walk it and present it here today to you, whilst keeping safe myself, my sibling, my parents' memory and our wider family. How to balance my personal and professional lives, what even is that boundary? Private and public, internal and external, intimate and superficial. How to be authentic to my emotions yet create something appropriate for this panel presentation now. How do I know if I can hold things together for this room of strangers? When it's too soon to deal publicly with this? Is it all too soon? And have I left enough time between the walk and the presentation to process my thoughts and emotions? No. I reserve my procrastination and rename it percolation, time to let things percolate. I like to work to a deadline. I try to be gentle with myself, to be present in the moment, to trust in the process. And as I type this on Tuesday evening, I see an alert to message my best friend. His mum has another cancer, this time untreatable. A video call for an hour and I'm emotionally exhausted again. I always knew that this project would be emotionally challenging and that I'd have to find ways to self-nurture and use my existing support network. Professionally, I've dedicated over 10 years working with people at the end of their lives, but in the last 2 years, I've cared for my parents through their ill health, their deterioration and their final days. After this personal trauma, now I'm navigating the pathways of my own loss and grief, a cathartic journey. I plot a route onto 2 old green OS Pathfinder maps, 2.5 inches to 1 mile. And 2 weeks ago today, my sister T and I walked our pilgrimage, a walk around a former mill town in the northwest of England. She knows I'll be presenting here, but she didn't want to know anything in advance of the walk, except for whether she was boots or trainers, and should she bring some food. No. We meet at the train station, and as we exit, I point out the college building where our dad studied. T thinks his building is elsewhere. There have been many college names and campuses in the town over the years. We know he attended the technical college, we just can't decide where that was. And I become emotional at the start of the walk that I've created. Staying in the moment of this walk. We catch the 507 bus from Stand E, but we don't know this road out of town very well. The big left-hand bend is a well-known landmark, but we need the buzz's display screen and Google Maps to tell us where to get off. We walk to where my mum was born. The side of the street with the odd numbers is no longer there. Small, semi-detached, replaced a terrace. There's a gang of small kids playing in the street. We know that my mum played outdoors. Though the lime tree is old, it can't have been there when mum was here, but the railway and the arches definitely were. My mum said she was born at number 5. She was the 7th of 8. Our one remaining uncle, Robert, says they only moved here after the mum died, sometime after giving birth to the youngest child, so my mum would have already been born. I asked T, who do we believe? Mum never had a great memory, so we both say Uncle Robert. As we move toward the arches, T notices that in the distance she can see the same hill here that we can see from Mum and Dad's house. She spots this link between birthplace and death place. We deviate from the planned route because we spot an unmarked footpath alongside the railway. We walk past the primary school that Mum went to and critique the school's mottos and values that they have displayed on a board. Crossing the ring road, the council houses are newer here, built in the 1930s, semis with front and rear gardens. We crossed over the railway line to find where Mum's family lived before they moved to number 5. We stand across the road from this number 30 and spend a long time thinking about life in this house and why they moved. It's only the second time we've been here. The first was 4 months ago. We ask questions to each other about why we were never brought here. Yes, as children, the other side of town felt like a long way away, but I've measured it and it's less than 1.5 miles from where we grew up. We asked questions about why we never asked questions. We were curious about so many other things, so why not this? When my mum was 10, her dad died, and she and 2 of her siblings, the 3 youngest children, were informally fostered with the family of her brother's school friend. This must have been locally, on this estate maybe, but we don't know where. Another gap in our knowledge. We were told that this family, that marriage, broke down 1 year later, and this led to my mum and her 2 siblings being taken into care. I was orphaned at age 55. My mum was orphaned at age 8. Or was it 9? Or was it 10? We catch the 527 bus along the ring road. We don't know this area well, but crossing the next junction is a watershed for memories and stories as we quickly point out several places. A conservative club where a cousin's 18th was, a supermarket we used to go to, a school friend's house. When we get off the bus, we wave down the road to where our mum worked as a mystery nurse in a primary school, now a boys' academy, but it's too far to include on our trek. Throughout the day, we acknowledge and wave at other places in the distance, workplaces, schools, homes. T went to Sixth Form College near here and points out where the sweet shop and the chippy used to be. No sign of them in the buildings that are now homes. We get pies from the bakers and then later cakes from another one. T says it's good to be out. It's good to be out walking. It's good to be out walking with me. And it's good to be out walking with me on this walk. Walking side by side, there's more chat of a fight, an underage pub visit, forgotten boyfriend, an unpaid for piano, houses of childhood friends. The route was plotted, but there's an unplanned outpouring of things remembered. The site of many memories is a wall that we used to climb on as a shortcut. T can't resist climbing it now, but fences mean that she has to clamber back down. We remember being in a gang of kids sliding down the grassy slope on a big piece of wood. The path at the bottom is where we learnt to ride our bikes. As we walk up the streets to the house we lived in and Sly was 10, T was 8, she becomes tearful. I've visited here before, but she hasn't. We spend a long time talking, looking, reminiscing. The brickwork, a back gate long gone, the council's various improvements, cars settled in the back streets, footballs kicked against the wall, the rag and bone man, the lock-up garages, disagreeing whether T broke her leg, and what we did the day Elvis died. We know these streets well, or we did do. I rattle off a list of shop names on the main road. As we wait at the bus stop, we look out where the phone box used to be. We catch the 125 bus up the hill to the children's home where Mum lived. The official name was a family group home, married couple looking after 6 children. There were 2 homes next door to each other, semi-detached, big houses, more affluent as you move away from the town and up the hill. The 2 sisters were in one house, the brother in the other. My research tells me that these homes first opened when my mum was 11. We're named on the first set of children to live here. T rolls a cigarette as we stand outside and imagine what life was like. We discuss what we were and weren't told. Secrets, absences, blurred memories. We passed the primary school that the three of us went to, my dad, me and T, and onto the church where my parents were married. I noticed the carved heads on the church door, and T tells me that they're on all the wedding photos. At the back is a churchyard. At the back is a churchyard where some of our relatives are buried, but there are no graves for our parents, due to decisions they made about what they wanted to happen to their bodies post-death. Bequeathals, medical colleges, cremations, celebrations of life, parties, not funerals. I ponder, if they'd not become atheists, would they be buried here, as if where their graves would have been? 2 sets of ashes sit on the shelves in their living room. What was their living room? Waiting to be scattered. Where do we go to remember someone where there's no grave? We visit a pub for a break, and I show T some of my research. I've read some pieces out loud en route. I found letters between our parents, but neither of us is ready to open these, and I show her one of Dad's union badges. We walk up to a house that was significant in my dad's life, the same style of 1930s council house. It was where he lived with his family, but T disagrees and says it's when Mum and Dad lived in a flat, but there's no sign of the maisonette that she describes. We talk less about his family because we knew those relatives, we knew the stories, there are less gaps. And we head off along the ring road, but are able to divert via the lodge. There's a path which appears to pass over the water. This is a very affluent area, and we walk downhill, remembering Mum's discuss at the no bikers sign on a pub. We cross over another A road to locate where my dad was born. The maternity hospital is now a cul-de-sac, the Mews. Luxury but bland modern townhouses. We've never been here before, but yet we travelled on that main road every day to secondary school. We talk of strikes and town hall sit-ins, hijacks, canal boats, and other stories from Mum and Dad's lives. But there's been so much nostalgia from our lives. T texts me later with her reflections of the walk. Wandering with purpose, ad hoc route changes, remembering and not remembering, learning, playing. We catch our final bus, 575, to where my dad worked. He started his apprenticeship aged 15 and worked there until the large engineering works closed. 5,000 people made redundant. I showed my sister that I found in the paperwork that showed that our dad went from £238 a week to £37 a week. And she recounts something that I didn't know, that she drove Dad to sign on the first time, and how much this upset him. We talk about how as young kids, we would meet him here as he finished his shift. She remembers him pointing out the foundry where he worked. As we look out onto the sides, the sun is low in the sky, houses are being built on the far side, but where the foundry was, it's empty now, demolished, a void. We're getting to the end of our pilgrimage. She decides that we'll get food for our tea, and we get a taxi to do the final leg, back to the house that we lived in since I was 10, our family home, and where both of our parents died, where both of them wanted to die, and where their ashes sit on the shelf. 3 trains, 4 buses, 1 taxi, 8 hours and 15 miles. My Hiref. Thank you.
For the art couple, simple question. What does dendro, the word geography on the front side, like to know what that means?
Oh.
Science of trees.
Is it?
Yeah, so dendros is like the yeah, is it Greek for tree?
Sorry, yeah.
A tree, yeah.
Now we know. Thank you.
Like rhododendron being one of them. Yes, that's the way to remember it.
Again, using a kind of unusual or archaic word, you know, a word that's not normally.
figured on the back between those genes.
Thank you very much. I was just wondering during these presentations about this notion of fear, if you think it's a cruel emotion because it's obviously a longing for home. It's a home you can never get to. That seems to be quite poignant to me. What do you think?
Should we all?
Yeah.
I think everybody. Who wants to start? Do you want to start?
One emotion is an emotion. For me, it's if you love something, you care about something, when it's gone, it's absence. You can have that strong emotion towards the person. It's there.
But if you could get back there, if you could, and you can't, but if you could, that would satisfy it completely. You would never feel that again. It's something that cannot be met. Isn't it like that sort of the Portuguese thing about fado, which is, the singers are on the street, the singers, that sort of yearning, and it's just always unsatisfied. It's still there. It's repeated again and again. And is it not? I don't know. For me, it's very poignant. The poignancy is because you just can't get there. That's the way I felt during that present yours, which was that I felt quite emotional about that.
Yeah, I think it can be very cruel, like with our trees, for example, the fallen trees. Okay, that's a loss. That's just a loss. Whereas other trees that haven't fallen, that's different. So I think there's something is totally elsewhere, and something I think is still within reach. So maybe there's two levels of Uriah. I'm not sure, maybe. And we also forgot to add actually that so our tree work is an ongoing thing, and we found out that one of the iconic trees in Canterbury actually are baobab trees, which is like very unique for this country. And so this is like a really, it's not cruel, it's something like, oh, this is brilliant, we can actually go there, we can reach the tree, even though we tried yesterday and they were enclosed in a fence, but we know they're there. But something that's fallen isn't. So maybe there's two elements.
Yeah, I agree with all of the foregoing. I feel that it's a way of taking forward the past in a very positive way, even though it's impossible, to redress it or to even encompass it. And I think my understanding of Uriah is that, the emotional attachment is so overwhelming that in a way it's about submission to that, about acknowledging it, not running away from it, and just facing it. And I think the examples that I've come across, it is a very powerful, and it's kind of interesting that it's arisen out of Wales, I think. And for me personally, it had a resonance with a Japanese word, which there's no direct translation in, because I've spent some time over there, called sabishi. And it's a kind of longing again, usually about a person, somebody or something or someone missing. And when I was there, I was trying to test usage, and so I associated it. I said, well, I'm going to feel that when I go back to England for Japan. And they really understood. Yeah, my friends really understood what that meant. That it's something that can be very positive.
Why don't we have an English word for that?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a good question.
Is it because we're different from the Welsh essence?
We erase our past.
Yeah. Ruth, did you want to come back in? Can you put your mic back on?
Yeah, I was just going to, I think it's in terms of like where I think it's a lot of it's been covered really, that when say Lydia's talking, which was incredibly moving, and in terms of grief there is different as well from say trees, or in the context say I was thinking around the river, that earth can give us that hope as well for change. It can also be a motivating force. So I think there's different contexts in which you're applying it. From my point of view, I would see it from what I was talking about, for that my drawing, it would help motivate me to try and get cleaner rivers and to value nature and do things that help promote that. But I think it's very different in different contexts.
Thanks, Ruth. Does anyone else have a yes? I'm going to take you over there.
Hello, this is Lydia. I was just wondering, I might have misunderstood, but my understanding was that the project you presented was created especially for this. And I was just wondering if that is the case, or just generally, if you thought, given thought to progressing it and what the outcome might be, or if it's just bracketed and that's it. That's
That's a good question, thank you. Hi. I actually got about 6 years ago when I was 50, and I had a do, and 7 of my cousins came, who I didn't know very well, hadn't really someone I'd never met before, even though they lived in the same town as the family. And I talked about it and never did anything, and then as my parents got ill, my sister talked about it as an idea, and then we must do this. And what I was going to say in my presentation but edited out was that when the first thing came about the ad, I said, I saw it and just kind of briefly looked at it and I'm not interested now, I'm not going back to Canterbury, I'm like, that's miles away, and I dismissed it. And then I kind of went, looked back at it, and I read like the heritage bit, and maybe it didn't appeal to me, and then I read the Iraq bit, so this was in March, it was 3 months after my mum died, it just leapt out at me, and I said to myself, I've got to do that, I've got to go there. And like I said, I presented 2 years ago online, but it's a small part of kind of my life, it's becoming more of a part, so if you ask any questions like that, I thought already what was I going to do, was it going to be anything else, was it just a standalone? I'm thinking about it a bit more now, so if anyone's got any ideas, but it's that also trying to how public I want to go with something like this, because it's so personal and has ramifications for other people, so hence the system substitution. Maybe a magazine or booklet, I don't know, slideshow. You got any ideas?
Yeah, sure.
It's not a question, but we've got a couple of comments from others in the chat about the very Welsh nature. But I'll leave that up so you can see. Does anyone have any quickly check? And if you're online, please do put a question in the chat, because we've got a little bit of room in this session.
Thank you to all of you. All of the presentations are absolutely wonderful and so many presentations. I have a question for the art couple about trees that have been lost. And I'm wondering whether you think that trees that have fallen or been lost in some way can themselves become a site of belonging in the sense that, like, so I'm going to express this through like an anecdote. So there's a place not far from here in Kent called 3 Barrows Down, which is on the old Pilgrim's Way route close to Canterbury. And there are lots of beech trees that grow there, but it's a really old site. And where a lot of the old beech trees grew, you can see where older trees have been uprooted, and the root systems of beech trees are amazing. And you can see where there's lots of earth where former trees have passed. And I only know the site or those trees through their lots, if that makes sense. I know their sort of like bumps and things like that. And so to me, when I think about site, I think about all the history that's contained within them through the trees that have been lost. And I guess, yeah, I'm wondering if absence itself can be something that you long for, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes, certainly. It's interesting because even absent the sort of open land, very sparsely with very few trees and many islands and moorlands around Britain, which is like a typical British landscape now. 400 years ago, usually that was heavily wooded, and century-old commons where it talks about this particular island was full of trees, and now there isn't any. So all this, which is now part of Britain in a way, is an absence of trees. So and the Hiraeth doesn't come anymore because it's so typical British to have the absence of trees.
Well, yeah, as a Briton, I definitely. It's a lot about absence and negation, I think, and our history, the history of these islands, is very much bound up with that. And I think there's an amazingly strong resonance that's very important that we address. And this was coming through. I mean, we didn't have an object with it apart from the trees themselves or their disappearance. But as we're gaining momentum, and we're going to incorporate some trees in Canterbury, or missing trees even, it's beginning to start speaking. Yeah, definitely. And I think with your project as well, it seems to me that you're in a dialogue with it. That there, even though it is a loss, it has a direct voice that speaks very deeply. So this, I think, is something maybe that resonates with everyone that's kind of coming to this. I mean, it seemed a strange concept, didn't it? To us, we'd never heard of it, and we couldn't thought, well, how is this going to fit with what we're engaged with? But
yeah, and for us, it was literally being invited to. So this is by the way the festival, the Ruth, and it was just by coincidence we were invited to perform at that festival in Wales, and they spoke about Hiraeth. So all of a sudden, we have to connect this now.
So there was definitely something going on, and like you saw a name earlier on. There's a gentleman here that I met, and we've literally just started a project last week that resonates immediately. It's an unusual time we're in, and I think Hiraeth is appropriate in lots of ways. Yeah.
Can I just say something to that? Because it reminded me of gravestones. You know, you say when they fall over and then they start to disintegrate the tree that remains, and then there might be a mound. But like you said, all those trees that have been gone, that have lost, but we don't. The trace that's left, the remnant of them. So the trees that no longer have a remnant, they still existed. The people that have no remnant, no physical place on gravestone, those people still existed, but there's just not that visual kind of prompt to remember them.
Yeah, it's like stories and because obviously their contribution is there, but finding it is
They exist.
Yeah.